All right, guys, welcome to episode 8. We've got a lot to share with you guys today. I just want to give a shout out. We've had a little bit of a growth in our subscribers on YouTube, so we appreciate all support. I also want to let you guys know that we are now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So feel free to subscribe there and give us a nice review or a rating. We appreciate that. And be sure to, as always, follow us on Facebook and Instagram for any updates throughout the week. So we're going to start our show off this week discussing a little bit of college football and one situation in particular, a situation that I typically am a big proponent of backing the head coach of the Penn State football team. But this week, after the events that unfolded, I have to take a step back and assign some blame that is rightfully deserving to James Franklin. So Dan, why don't you lead that?
Yeah, so the game that we're kind of referencing was the Indiana-Penn State game. Personally, I kind of saw the beginning of the game, and Penn State got off to the really fast start, went down the field, scored a touchdown on fourth down, kind of looked like, hey, Penn State ranked number 8, playing against the Indiana team that's not ranked. We went down there, we scored right away. But then as I started watching the game, I started noticing the conservative play calling was one of the things that I noticed early on in the game. I feel like they were trying to establish a run, which I'm not against, but it didn't really seem like it was working. And by the end of the quarter, you got the sense that Indiana they felt like they were supposed to be in that game, and even had a couple opportunities where they kind of missed on some deep shots. So anyways, the game went along. Penn State fell behind, came back, took the lead. And then we had the moment where the running back, he said that his I guess momentum took him into the end zone, ended up scoring a touchdown, which allowed Indiana to get the ball back, drive down the field. There's just a lot of questionable plays in the game. I don't want to kind of recap the entire game because most people have already watched it, but it's just another instance of James Franklin. He didn't get to come out this week and play against a D2 school in his very first game. He had to come out and play against an actual Big Ten opponent. It wasn't even a great opponent, but this is what we kind of get from Penn State from time to time. This almost reminded me a little bit of the Minnesota game last year. It was almost like people aren't afraid of Penn State. There's no reason to be afraid of them at this point, and they know that if it comes down to the end, and I take almost any coach at the very end of a game in the Big Ten right now over James Franklin.
Wow.
Yeah. So to get a little more specific to the end of the Indiana-Penn State game first, before we get into the bigger picture with Franklin, you essentially had a situation where if Penn State runs the ball 3 times, Indiana had 1 timeout, and the amount of time that was left, it would have, if they run the ball 3 times and don't score, and Indiana uses their timeout, they're going to run the clock down most likely somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds, kick a field goal, and go up 4 points with 10 to 15 seconds left. Essentially the game's over. Even if they miss the field goal with 10 seconds left and no timeouts, it's still like miracle time at best for, to get a win for Indiana. Instead, they score a touchdown on first down, and they allow a minute 20 or a minute 40 with 1 timeout for Indiana to have that chance. And Indiana's only down 8 with the touchdown and the extra point that they end up kicking to be up 8. So now you've essentially made it a pretty realistic chance to get this game into overtime, as opposed to no realistic chance of Indiana putting it in overtime or winning at all. So that's a big mistake, obviously. I'm not immediately going to rip Franklin for that because I don't know what was said in the huddle, in the locker, on the sidelines. Hey, guys, get down. We are not trying to score. Maybe he said that and the bonehead running back just didn't do it. We're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids here. But maybe he didn't know. It didn't – you would think, guys who've been playing football their whole lives or however long, college football level players would know, okay, coach said get down. I know I got to get down. But in a minute, who knows? So I'm not going to immediately rip him there, although it does look like something where you would immediately say, like, what the heck? Like, they're unprepared. How did the coach not tell them? But we don't know. Franklin looked pretty mad as soon as he scored the touchdown, you know what I mean? But we don't know. And Franklin took accountability after the game. The coaches do that, so I'm not going to assume that meant Franklin didn't tell him. But what I will rip him for is if you really know we cannot afford to score here, why not just kneel down 3 times? Right. Even if you think we wanted to get that extra 8 yards to get our field goal, an 18-yarder instead of a 28-yarder, which is really not a great argument. Who cares if you make the field goal or not? You're running the clock down at 10 seconds. The game's probably over anyway.
Yep.
So that is my thing is like, if you really knew we don't want to score here, you either tell them, but more than that, we'll just kneel down, let them call their timeout and kneel the other two. We run it down, we win the game. So that I take issue with on either both levels or one of the levels if you don't want to rip him for,
Right.
the fact that we don't know what's said in the huddle. Maybe he did tell him to get down. I don't know. I would guess they probably didn't. Either way, there's a big mistake on the coaching staff's part. Now, to the bigger Franklin discussion, we've had this discussion. For those of you who don't know, this has kind of been a back and forth thing that we've done. Right. And my thing about Franklin, when Dan's always ripped him like not being the greatest coach and he's just not impressed with him and he'd be kind of okay with us moving on from him, is we've done more as Penn State in the last 3 to 4 years than we've done probably in the last, 8 years, 10 years. And that was always my big argument is like, I don't know who's going to be who we can get out there that's better for Penn State to put them in any better position than they've been in right now, which is they've been knocking on the door to get in the playoff for the last 2 to 3 years, haven't done it. And I understand you want somebody who's going to put you in the playoff and maybe even win a national championship. That's hard to find. But I will say, and my defensive, and Dan knows this, my defensive Franklin he's been a great recruiter. I have even questioned a lot of the on-field coaching ability, and I will continue to, in this case, to criticize that. So I'm with you, Dan, on that. But overall, I've defended him for that reason. But the more and more he makes these type of stuff on the field, it's getting harder and harder to defend him. I'll give you that.
So let me say just a couple things. So to go back to the game a little bit, the same situation you're talking about, Trav, is the exact same situation that happened in Atlanta in the NFL.
Exactly. Yep. I was thinking about that.
And Gurley even said too. I was reading that he said, like, obviously he was pissed that he did that and that he scored and that they said in the huddle, don't score, don't score, don't score. He didn't say that his momentum took him in like the Penn State guy did, and I didn't see that, but I'm sure that was him trying to cover for himself. And like you said, Franklin's going to take accountability, especially at the college level. They're going to take accountability as coaches for their players. So we don't really know whether he, as a coach decided that or not. What I was a little bit more upset with is that, Indiana goes down and scores. Penn State gets the ball back. Their kicker makes a terrible kick and we get field position. We get the ball down. We have a chance. It's 3rd down. We have the chance with about 20 seconds left to run a quick 5-yard play and get us in legitimate field goal range. And they kick a field goal, knowing that in college football, the clock stops on a 1st down. There is no harm in taking a chance to throw the ball 5 to 7 yards.
Totally agree.
Get those extra yards. That is where I'm upset with his coaching ability. Everything else, I get it. And to kind of go on what you said and back you a little bit, yes, usually he's great at recruiting, but I was looking at this Penn State team this year, and I didn't think they were going to be a real contender this year anyways, regardless of, the modified schedules, playing just the Big Ten and all that stuff. I thought it was going to be a weird season. You've seen a lot of these other, bigger teams that were supposed to be, highly ranked, losing games like LSU lost to Mississippi State early, just because of the lack of preparation from the training camp, from the off-season stuff. But I didn't think that there was a lot of weapons. He doesn't have the Miles Sanders, the Saquons. Like, I think that Sean Clifford has to put too much on his shoulders, and I don't think he's good enough to be a guy that can literally carry the whole offense. And I don't think there's a lot of weapons on the offensive side for them. Penn State always has their defensive weapons, but I don't think they have the offensive weapons this year. And maybe that is a knock at his recruiting this year. I don't know.
All right, well, let me ask you this, Jetty. What's your bigger picture outlook in the opinion of James Franklin?
I think that I agree with you on the side of, like, to me, there's only but so many elite coaches. Like, to be in that top tier of coaches that can consistently take you to the playoff, there's like 3 or 4 of them. Like, you can name them. Like, you got the Dabos, you got Nick Sabans, you got, those kind of guys that are there every year. And I don't know that he is necessarily going to be able to get to that level as a coach, but I also don't know who out there is better. I would put him as a top 10 college coach. Like, hands down.
Let me ask you guys this question. Like, obviously you have your Sabans, you have your people in that upper echelon. Obviously those guys are not attainable because they're already somewhere.
Exactly.
So is it time to start looking for someone to take a chance on that you feel like, this guy's just not taking us to the level that we want to get to? It's like Penn State, like you said, Trav, they're knocking on the door every year, but they're never really opening it. And so it's time to maybe take a chance on somebody that isn't really that name person yet.
Here's my biggest problem with James Franklin. He will go into a press conference and he will show up his players about how they were properly prepared and they just didn't get it done. But there have been so many times throughout his career where I've seen him make the same coaching mistake over and over and not really show that growth. I don't think they should fire James Franklin, But I think someone needs to hold him accountable to the same way that he said that he tries to act like he holds the players accountable. So he needs to step up to the podium one of these times instead of throwing maybe the players under the bus or being angry about a loss. Because I've seen some really like bad stuff when he's left the field and his interaction with the fans. He needs to step up and say, "Hey, I need to develop as a coach and be better." That's all I want from James Franklin. But to this point, it's been a lot of arrogance from him, not really that humble, "Hey, you know what? This is all me. I need to be better."
I totally get that, Dan. And I think that maybe, and maybe it's an issue with, with the program in general, and maybe it could be a widespread college issue, is that maybe there needs to be more intervention on the part of bringing in the coaching staff. Maybe he shouldn't always pick his own position coaches. Maybe there should be more, from the athletic department that helps with those kind of things so that he's not picking the same guys that he knows. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not saying that is the answer. I'm just saying I don't know what the answer would be because I know you've consistently over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been in this argument about James Franklin. I think that he's a better leader of men than he is a football coach. I will say that, but at the college level, half of the job is being a leader of men because you're bringing these guys in and having to get them prepared. But like you said, let me ask you a question, Dan. And if you're in James Franklin's shoes and you are preaching all day at practice, all day in your situational gameplay, even before that, you're telling them in that play, do not score a touchdown, and your running back goes in. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you take ownership of that from a coaching standpoint? If you're just ingraining it in their heads, but they don't do it, if they don't follow through.
Yeah, I think the thing that you do is not necessarily say, I don't think that you dog the guy, but I think that you can come at it and just be real and just say, hey, they're human. Like, they make that mistake. And I think that would be accepted by people to be like, hey, at the end of the day, they're players. And I think it's a coach's job to protect his players, even if they were the ones that made the mistake. Protect your players.
Sure.
And
he does. He usually always does that.
He does to some extent, but then at other times he's like, after they lost to Ohio State last year, he was like, he was talking about how they were prepared and they're ready and they're getting ready to take the next step. And just where's the next step at, James?
That's where I get kind of like conflicted because I've seen in those games against Ohio State where we have those 2 possession leads in the fourth quarter and we blow it. And to me, that isn't always a coaching situation. If these guys outperform you as athletes in the fourth quarter, like, I don't think that's always coaching. Now, if you're going to go to like situational games where it's like, okay, like, why are we letting off the gas and doing run on 4 straight possessions?
That happened in Ohio State games twice.
In one of the games it did. The second game, we just didn't move the ball at all. We tried throwing it. Nothing was there, but I don't know. I mean, we can revisit it. We definitely will have.
I think Aggie has a question for Trav here.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to ask was, Dan had mentioned earlier that time and time again, game after game, he sees him make these same mistakes. Is that something that Trav and Judd, that you guys see too, and you're just kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt? Or do you not really seeing him making big coaching errors like Dan has said he's seeing it time after time? Are y'all not seeing that from him?
I don't think I see it to the extent that Dan has preached it. And I don't think I see necessarily the same like recurring things. I don't off the top of my head think like, oh, he always has, time management issues, or he always has this play calling issue or whatever. I mean, obviously he's not calling the plays anyway, but to an extent there's some involvement there. But I have questioned his in-game coaching ability to some level in general, but not necessarily like is pounding the desk for it and not some like recurring thing that I've seen. So.
Yeah, well, they have a tough schedule this year. I mean, there's a good chance they could lose a lot of games if they play the football they did on Saturday. Hopefully, James Franklin can get them going. As fans would hope for that. And who knows?
Absolutely.
Maybe they beat Ohio State, and then the season's back. They have a chance. You never know. I mean, you never know. It's
you're exactly right.
Anything,
you're exactly right.
Happen. But we're gonna move on to NFL. There's a lot of good games this weekend that we were excited about watching. So let's jump right into that, Trav.
Yeah, the 5-star matchup this week, the undefeated versus undefeated Steelers-Titans, ended up being a pretty good game in the end. The first half was total domination by the Steelers. I felt like the final score was not necessarily indicative of how well and how much the Steelers controlled the game. I felt like in the second half, the Titans were pretty fortunate. A couple of tipped interceptions and a fortunate call here or there from the refs. Really allowed them to get back into a game that I really feel like shouldn't have ended up being that close. So it ended up being a really good game. Credit the Titans for getting back into it. But to me, I was coming out of it thinking another impressive performance from the Steelers. Really in all 3 phases. I know the second half, it looked like a meltdown, but if you watch the game, like I said, the tipped interceptions, especially the one, it's just the D lineman gets his hand up and the ball goes straight in the air and that's a free 3 points that the Titans end up scoring, and then you take 3 off the board. On the other tip pick, which wasn't a bad throw by Ben, Juju's one-on-one with the linebacker. He tries to fit it in there. Linebacker makes a nice play, tips it up, it falls into the DB's hands. So I'm not really going to criticize the Steelers too much and give the Titans necessarily a ton of credit for those things. I feel like the Steelers still should have won that game by 10 points, but a couple of crazy plays and ends up coming down to a last-second field goal. Titans miss it. But I will say one thing I will give Tennessee credit for. I think there's this narrative out there that, they're such a running team that they can't come from behind. I've watched them a lot between the last half of last year since they put Tannehill in and this year. Come from behind. No, probably not so much this year because they haven't had to come from behind, although last week against the Texans they did it. Now, they weren't necessarily down a bunch of scores like this one, but I think they are a team that I've seen in general can come from behind. And even if they get down 2 or 3 scores, they can stick to their running game enough and kind of just show the heart as a whole to come back and be a team that, you know what, if they get down 2 scores, they'll stick with Derrick Henry and they still can come back and don't just, throw them away. If not, I just think they need to tighten up their defense if they're going to put themselves in that top 3 AFC. I think top 3 AFC as far as Baltimore, Kansas City, Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh kind of established the pecking order a little bit in the AFC with that win.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree. We were kind of talking about this. I think that there's a narrative that carried over from last year, but in the second half, a lot of their receivers came up and made big plays when they needed to make them, a lot of third down conversions. One of the things I want to say is I think what the Titans are as a team, just after watching that game, and obviously I haven't watched a lot of them, but I think their defense is suspect. I think you can move the ball on them, but I think what they are is a team that's always looking to create turnovers. So in the first half, you saw Ben just tearing him up. He was Ben had an incredible first half. He really played well. In the second half, they created turnovers. Like the guy that got his hand on the ball, give him credit when he tipped it up in the air. That was a good defensive play.
That's mostly luck, though.
Yeah, at the line.
But knocking the ball down, okay, nice play. But the fact that you think he knocked it up in the air that high on purpose.
No. I'm not saying how he tipped it was, but just as a defensive lineman, you're taught if you can't get there, put your hand up. So he did what he was supposed to, and that's not creating a
turnover. That's making a nice defensive play that you were lucky to get the turnover on, not a
I completely agree. I'm not saying that Ben made a bad throw or anything.
But you're giving him credit as if they turned him over and they did something.
They did. That defensive lineman is taught to put his hand up. So he doesn't know where the ball – he could just bat it back down and be a good play too. So, but what I'm trying to say is I think that's what they are. And if they can turn another team over a couple of times, they can really play the brand of football they want to. So in the second half, they were able to do that against Pittsburgh, and that's what allowed them to get back in the game. So I still think Pittsburgh's like the cream of the crop in the AFC right now. But I think I don't know. Do they play the Chiefs at any point this year? Are we ever going to see that matchup until the playoffs?
I actually am not. I don't know. I'm still not fully sold on the legitimacy of the real Super Bowl contention of the Steelers, just because until I see them play the Ravens and until I see them, play against the Chiefs, really, you're not going to know because it's just we can beat the Titans, but there's some people out there who think the Titans are pretenders still.
You want to play somebody who's a legit upper echelon team.
I want to play a team that I hate to say it, but that the sports world views as a real contender, because there's still a lot of people that don't view the Titans as a real contender.
So you guys like a fake 6-0 team?
I don't think we're a fake 6-0.
You got to give yourself credit.
I don't think we're a fake 6-0. I think it's the fear of my natural fanhood coming out and not wanting to get my expectations that we're better than Kansas City, because everybody's like, oh, Steelers are the top. Steelers are the best team in the NFL. Steelers are the top of the power rankings. And I don't want to give ourselves that until we knock off the best, who is the Super Bowl champion in our conference.
you can only play the teams that are on your schedule. There are plenty of teams out there. There are plenty of teams out there who haven't played any of those teams that you're talking about, and we still give them respect. So
yeah, I give them respect.
Let me just answer that for you. They are a legitimate Super Bowl contender.
I agree.
Now, are they? Can you just guarantee that you should rank them ahead of Baltimore or KC? Maybe not. But we can.
Well, according to the stat in the NFL era, whoever wins the game between 2 5-0 teams automatically makes the Super Bowl. Did you guys see that stat? Where it was eight times that 2 teams that are 5-0 or better have played, the winning team has gone on to make the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and it's not as obviously it's not as easy as that stat wants to make it out to be. And I'm not even saying that I would pick the Steelers over even the Ravens, but and much less the Chiefs to get there. But as of now, they've shown what it is. So I think they've done enough with what they have played, especially the last 2 weeks. Playing quality teams, whether you think those teams are like super legit or Super Bowl contenders or just like quality, they're good.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I do think they're legit. I think it's just the natural fear of me not like until we can beat the best, I can't consider us the best. So people putting us as like number 1 team in the NFL and top of the power rankings, that always scares me because I'm like, All right. Well, but I had a question for you guys. There were some teams that I was expecting to see. I was kind of looking to see what they were going to do this week with their matchups, and then I was expecting them to kind of right the ship or for them to kind of stand out a little bit. And one of them, or I'll name a few of them. One of them was the Browns against the Bengals. The Browns struggled against the Bengals in a game
I
that they
think the
should have
Bengals are better
dominated.
than people give them credit for there.
I have always thought the Bengals were a little better than because they've lost
Yeah.
a lot of tough games. Another
And
one
Joe
is the
Burrow
Saints.
is for
The
real.
Saints-Panthers. The Saints won by 3 as well in a very close game. And then the Bills highly struggled with the Jets. I don't know if you guys saw that game or were tracking it on Sunday, but they ended up winning 18-10. But that game was like deep in the third quarter, and I think they were down, and they only had 6 field goals. They didn't score a touchdown all game. So I don't know what you guys' thoughts were on, like, if you think those teams are just not legit, if they're having bad weeks. For me, that's the Bills that they've lost 2 straight, and then they find a way to win, a game against the Jets that shouldn't even have been a close game. That I'm still not sure who they are.
I think, there's always those teams out there who are solid teams or good teams, whatever you want to call them, but they just, like Trav alluded to last week, he talked about the Steelers, even though they can be a really good team, sometimes you feel like they play down to competition. That happens with any kind of team, or, every team out there is an NFL team and has talent. So you're not always going to have a nice, pretty win by double digits, no matter who you're playing. So, those games happen. You want to see, as a fan of those teams, you want to see you have a convincing win and, not struggle against a team that you think is not a good team or a weak opponent, but that doesn't always happen. And I don't think you always have to take something out of every time that happens.
Yeah, I think it's just I'm kind of confused as why you even brought that up as like being a big deal. I don't really think it's noteworthy. It's one week. I don't look too much into it. And any of the stuff that you mentioned.
Well,
so
it's more so the reason I mentioned no. Listen, the reason I mentioned is because it's teams that came off of losses, like bad losses, when these teams were supposed to be expected contenders. Like the Browns were supposed to have turned the thing around, and then they got waxed by the Steelers, and then they struggled against Cincinnati.
Well, what makes you think that just because a team loses, that the next week they're expected to be really good? That never. That doesn't always happen.
It's turnaround games. That's what my question was. Is like, is it something that should be worried about for those teams?
No, I think it's just. They both won, so you're going to win ugly. So I know Dan was talking about the Card Seahawks at some point, and I wanted to mention that as well. To me, it was really ironic how the Seahawks, usually playing from behind and finding a way to get a win, they play from ahead the whole time. They were probably the better team, and then they find a way to lose it.
Yeah.
A couple of, just kind of a late comeback there from the Cardinals, who didn't seem like a better team to me. I felt like the turnovers kept them as close as it was anyway, and then at the end they find a way to get back in it. And then overtime was just bananas. That game was pretty crazy. Sunday Night Football, man, just has a way of like getting the craziest, like really good games. Like I feel like Monday Night Football sits back and is just like, man, why can't we get this? Well, one because they flex schedule, and they also pre-schedule the good games. And I know this one they lucked into the game, but anyway. It's just another great Sunday Night Football game and a great game in general. And I was just sitting back laughing at how the Seahawks find a way to lose a game when they're always a team that finds a way to win the game they shouldn't. They find a way to lose the game they should, and the Cardinals pulling a Seattle on them.
Yeah, it was really pretty amazing. I agree that Russell Wilson got the Russell Wilson treatment from Kyler Murray. It was a great game, man. I agree, if every game was like that. I think some of the really cool things about the game, I feel I've been a big fan, and on the record on this show, of the Cardinals. I've said several times, I think they're a legitimate team. I know a lot of people are like, oh, Cliff Kingsbury, Big 12. He's never had a winning record, but I think what they're doing there is good. And one of the guys that kind of stood out to me as I watched that entire game, and we can talk about the quarterbacks, but Budda Baker, man, I don't know if y'all watched him, but he was all over the field. And I think he's an up-and-coming safety that a lot of people maybe don't know about, but I felt like every time there was a big play in the game or every time there was a big-time tackle, he was the guy that was there, and he was just flying around the field. So I had a lot of fun watching him on the defensive side, making a lot of plays throughout the game.
Yeah, watching the Cardinals do what they did and then seeing the Niners with this little resurgence, you're like, man, could all 4 teams with 7 teams now in the playoffs, could all 4 teams in the West get in? I mean, it's a super long shot. Because you got Tampa Bay and New Orleans in there that are, almost certainly both going to get in still. And then the Bears are still, a second team from the North that will probably be in the mix. But man, it's like that West is strong.
Yeah, it's definitely the strongest division especially after seeing how the Niners have played even through injuries.
Yeah, they absolutely thumped the Pats which is another thing I don't know if you guys like. What the heck has happened to Cam Newton? What happened to him
That's what I wanted to
on
say.
Sunday? And then what has happened the last 2 weeks in general? I know he catches COVID and he has 3 weeks off. Okay, so you expect 1 week bad, but then this week he looked even worse. The Pats are in shambles, and Cam himself is in shambles. He might lose his job.
Yeah, he
There's
already
the
gets benched in the
Bears.
middle of this game. Like, I mean, they're 2-4, man. Like, when's the last time like the Pats 2-4? Obviously, they've had Brady forever, so they're a winning team. Like, you're just not used to this. And Belichick even said after the game, like Dan mentioned, Franklin like taking some blame. Well, Belichick said, we were outcoached and outplayed. So I mean, he's putting the blame on himself too. So
stand up coach right there.
Exactly.
He
So
does
when
when
he
few
loses,
words.
he gives everyone the blame. It's a team sport. It involves
That's right.
coaches and players, and nobody did their job for them on Sunday. So
He probably didn't say as many words, Zach. He probably just said poor coaching, poor playing. That was it.
I heard him say we were outcoached and outplayed. So
Nice version of your attempt at
pretty
of your Frank Caliendo impression there.
that was a
Not
lot better
quite.
than Dan's Nance, though.
Yeah,
My
it
Nance
is
is
better.
bad.
It's better than
It is better.
Dan's Nance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my pick of the Patriots to win that division was solely off of the efforts of thinking about Belichick being the best coach in football. But I bet, if you're Tom Brady, you got to be smirking right now. That you got off that ship. And you think about something Aggie said too is like at the beginning of the season, the reason you picked the Bills, right, Aggie, was because
Yep.
he said like taking into account all of the players that opted out. Like, are we seeing that now that all the talent that they lost? I don't know, Like, is them having all those opted out players, is that contributing to it, or is it really just that bad of Cam's play?
Well, I think the two leaders on their defense definitely hurts their defense for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
Yeah,
two
but-
of their best defensive players.
They looked fine the first 5 weeks, and really it's the offense. The offense is the opt-outs are on
offense,
defense. The notable opt-outs are
can't
from
do
defense,
anything.
but the offense is the issue. So, yeah, I'm sure that hurts them as a whole, especially on defense. But they're playing fine defensively. The issue is offense, and I think it's because Cam's showing us a little bit of who he really was, which is just an inconsistent pocket passer.
Yeah.
They've gotten away, I think, from the running aspect, and maybe teams are just keying on it more and not letting them do it. But I don't know, man. He was terrible. He couldn't hit a throw on Sunday.
Yeah, it's been bad, really bad.
So one of the teams that I just want to kind of talk about before we close out here, I have a deep concern for the Saints. I know they're 4-2. I know they just beat Carolina. And I was okay with Juddy's question, by the way, because I think there's some good points here. I think that the Saints-Panthers game – yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got your back. That game was way closer. I know it's a division game, but I feel like the Saints have these years, as I've watched them under Sean Payton, where they kind of just like either underachieve or they're kind of flat. You know what I mean? And I feel like this is one of those years where they are really flat. And at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't really know what their schedule looks like, and I know they're 4-2 right now. But unless something drastically changes, I can see teams like Carolina maybe the next time they meet as they're growing into being a better team, and even Atlanta just being able to take them down at the end of the year. I actually have a fear that the Saints might not even make the playoffs by the end of the year, especially if the 4 NFC West teams are actually like potentially going to make it. That means somebody's going to be out, and that's going to be someone like the Saints or the Bucks, if that's actually a scenario that comes to fruition.
Yeah, Trav, you did say that you thought the Saints were pretty much them and the Bucks were probably both like.
Yeah, well,
good luck
here's what it'll
straight
come
in.
down to in that scenario. You've got, all right, let's assume Seattle wins the West. So that leaves the Cardinals, the Niners, and the Rams, the Bears, and let's say the Bucks, because right now, the way they look, adding AB, I was saying it's not guaranteed, but let's just say the Bucks win it, and let's say Green Bay wins that division, whoever in the East. It comes down to the Bears, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Niners, and the Saints for 2 spots.
2 spots, yeah. That's
what you're looking at.
And there's so many good teams in the West. Like,
could the Saints miss the playoffs? Yes, but I would say this, Dan. They're 4-2 without Michael Thomas, and then they last week without Emmanuel Sanders. They got to get Michael Thomas back. I don't know if it's the injury or the discipline. They got to get that figured out, and they got to get him back. He's too important. Once they do that, like you said last week or a week before, we both said this. Let's see how they look once that happens.
Yeah.
And then we'll judge them. I'm still waiting.
There's
if they
something
don't get him
going
back,
on.
though, I could see him missing the playoffs. Yeah.
There's something going on internally because there have been, and I know that you can't listen to everything. It's kind of on a rumor mill, but there was a little bit of talk about maybe possibly Michael Thomas getting traded, and he's had the discipline issue, and then he had a mysterious injury.
The hamstring
And
it
reminds me of kind of, and I don't want to like put something on him he doesn't deserve. But it reminds me of kind of like the early days of AB before he started freaking out and going crazy. Like he thinks he's bigger than the team almost. So I'm just going to say, let's watch that situation. But I think there's something going on in the Saints that isn't completely great. And Drew Brees is playing okay, but something there doesn't look right either.
Yeah, we'll have to see how things play out for the Saints. I know they've got a decent division. I mean, Carolina doesn't look like they're a terrible team. Atlanta obviously is having their issues, but they've got a tough division, a tough conference in general. So we'll have to see how that unfolds. But we're gonna move into some World Series baseball talk here as we close the show out. So Aggie, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really good series. I think it's been really back and forth. It's been entertaining to watch. I think maybe a lot of people, myself anyways, I kind of thought that the Dodgers would, I want to say make quick work of the Rays, but I thought that they would, maybe go 5, games. The Rays might get 1, maybe 2, and they may end up only getting 2. We're watching game 6 right now, so we'll kind of see what happens with that.
It's 1-0 Rays in the 5th.
Yeah, 1-0 Rays. So it's early. But I've been really pleased with it. I think it's been really entertaining to watch. It's been competitive games. There's only been kind of one game that was a little bit, if you want to say a blowout, it was 8-3. But, for the most part, I've been very entertained by it. I thought it's been a good series.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a great series so far. I don't know that I've seen an ending quite like that Game 4 ending.
That was wild.
So you're looking to go for the Dodgers to go 3-1. They bring in Jansen, which surprised me. I know he's had his issues, and they've kind of gone back and forth with him a little bit, I think, in the postseason. Not going him as like the clear-cut closer since some of his issues, but they bring him in, and then you have the base hit that's essentially supposed to just tie the game. The center fielder botches it, so they send the guy, and then by the time he gets it in, it looks like they're going to have him thrown out. He falls, so they're definitely going to have him thrown out. And then the catcher thinks he's still running, I guess doesn't realize that he fell down and just olays it and misses.
Yep.
And then the guy
so
gets up and just dives home and like tags it with his face. Is like so dramatic.
It was pretty bizarre.
Like, whoa, that's nuts. I can't believe that just happened. And then you come back in game 5 and you get a guy trying to steal home to tie the game in like the 4th inning, which is just an exciting play in itself to get a steal at home at all in a baseball season. And then we get that in the World Series. So I'm just like, man, this has been a great series. I didn't
very exciting.
I didn't expect the Dodgers to make quick work of them. I expected it to be a good competitive series. I didn't expect it to be this exciting. I feel like this is the best World Series we've seen in a few years. Like the last one that comes to mind was that Indians-Cubs World Series maybe 3 years ago. So
yeah,
I'm enjoying watching it, man. It's been really exciting baseball, which sometimes baseball can get a little monotonous, a little bit boring. But man, this one's been really good.
Yeah, I've enjoyed watching it. It is nice for it to be happening when playoff baseball would be happening. So at least it feels like that time of year. But my question is for you guys: if let's say the Rays win, and they win today and they come back, do you if you guys were betting men, who would you put your money on the Rays, or would you have faith in the Dodgers to finally get it done?
All the pressure would be on the Dodgers.
Oh,
all of it.
Yeah.
From what I've seen the last couple of years with the Dodgers, man, once, and I think I told you guys this, when that Game 4 ending happened, I was like, the Rays are going to win the series. And I don't know that. I'm not declaring it. I would stick with that as the prediction for me.
Yeah. Is Kershaw the Game 7 starter for the Dodgers?
No, it's
No.
Okay.
He already had a second start. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
He started at Game 5.
What's his name?
Well, I just wanted to say it looks like Kershaw has kind of redeemed himself a little bit in the series, which was
He's at
nice
least
to see.
that's good to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's 2-0. He's 2-0.
So it was nice to see that, because that guy's been such a great pitcher for so long.
I mean, it would be great to see. I mean, we're sitting here like we're watching it live, Game 6. So by the time this podcast airs, the World Series will be over. So even if it ends tonight in 6 or it goes to 7 tomorrow, and whoever wins, it's been a great series either way.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
I've been
very impressed. I've been very impressed with this kid, Arozarena, on the Rays.
Yeah,
and homers.
That dude is legit. He's going to be like the next superstar.
Yeah, 10 bombs in the postseason, 3 in the World Series.
That's wild.
I think he set a record for postseason.
I believe he did have some most postseason homers, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be crazy. I'll be watching Game 7 if it happens. I kind of hope the Rays win just so we can get a Game 7, because I mean after some of they've all been close games other than I think Game 2, or was it Game 1?
Yeah,
Game 2,
I think it was Game 2 was 8-3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's been a great series to watch and a lot of close games. So I'm hoping that
looks like the Dodgers went to the bullpen in the second inning, so they're already in the bullpen. So if it goes to a Game 7, man, it'll be interesting. It'll be fun.
It'll be good stuff to watch. But that's gonna wrap up our show for today. Thanks you guys for listening, for joining us again. We are on Spotify and Apple. If you've gotten this far, be sure to listen and subscribe and give us a good 5-star rating. and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'll see you guys next time.